My dad hadn't been in to check on the pigs for a few days. My parents were busy. He just tossed their food into the pen. But after a few days, he noticed that they were all just lying in this corner all the time. So he went in to check on them. They didn't look well. He decided he'd better try to move them. And they're heavy. They're pigs, right? But yeah, he finally managed to move one and discovered its entire underside was filled with maggots. Both pigs were being eaten alive. Life can be brutal on a farm.
Believe me, I understand that beginning a video on such a somber tone is an odd choice, one that might even turn off some potential viewers, but bear with me for a moment. If you're familiar with Charlie Kaufman, then an opening like this should really come as no surprise, not with his fixation on the surreal, existential, and depressing. So, when he had the opportunity to adapt Ian Reid's 2016 novel, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, you can be sure that it was a match made in heaven. Since his directorial debut in 2008, Kaufman has only made 2 other films, this one included, but not for lack of trying. Funding has, unfortunately, always been an issue, not to mention his want for an unadulterated vision. Given those limiting factors, it's really a wonder that I'm Thinking of Ending Things came to fruition at all. But luckily, this isn't a discussion about a piece of media that could have been. This exists, and not just as a retelling of the book on which it was based. Like all of Kaufman's adaptations, this is very much its own thing. But before we dive into it, a word from our sponsor.
I'm your favorite clown from Tulsi Town, where ice cream grows on trees. So have no fear, come and join me here and eat as much as you please. I will turn your frown fully upside down when you take your very first bite of vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. We are open day and night.
I'm thinking of ending things. Once this thought arrives, it stays. It sticks. It lingers. It dominates.
Those are the opening lines to both the book and film. You might think it morbid or uncomfortable, and you'd be right. But hold that thought. We'll come back to it later. For the time being, however, the film's content with deflecting those ideas and instead contextualizing the title and dialogue into relational problems. Here's one of our main characters, of sorts, Lucia. In a few moments, she'll be meeting up with her boyfriend, Jake. She'll describe their relationship as a real connection.
A rare and intense attachment.
That might strike you as an odd sentiment, however, given what she'll narrate next.
What's the point in carrying on like this? I know what it is, where it's going. Jake is a nice guy, but it's not going anywhere. I've known this for a while now. Maybe it's human nature to keep going in the face of this knowledge. The alternative requires too much energy, decisiveness. People stay in unhealthy relationships because it's easier. Basic physics.
She's thinking of ending things with Jake. But despite her misgivings, she's committed to the proverbial next step. A visit to meet her boyfriend's parents. It's the car ride over where we'll spend the next 20 or so minutes. The film, content with letting its characters and their conversation dominate. Love it or hate it, it's what this film does best. The discussion will veer into several different topics, from Bone Dog and the musical Oklahoma to an exploding colony of ants. If you had any doubts before, the latter should clue you into the writing on the wall.
Did you know there are insects that blow themselves up?
Yes,
Not everything wants to live.
There are certain ants, certain aphids.
For the good of their community.
They're suicide bombers.
Aside from the macabre discussion, this car ride should feel normal and innocuous, but it doesn't. In fact, something's a little off. It's almost as if...
Huh?
What?
Did you say something?
No, I don't think so.
Weird.
Yeah.
Jake can hear Lucy's thoughts. And that's not all. Every so often, she'll stare directly into the camera, shattering the fourth wall. Both of those elements coalesce into something incredibly unsettling. This film is by no means a horror, but Kaufman sure does emphasize the discomfort. And since we're talking about discomfort, perhaps now would be a good time to discuss the editing. It's its own sort of dialogue. That might be a pretentious description, but I do think it accurately sums up the approach of this film's editor, Robert Frazen. To illustrate this, let's rewind to the beginning of the car ride. Now, take note of the editing during this sequence. It's abrupt and irregular, not to the point of confusion, and it helps that we're in the same location, but rather to the point of distress. It's meant to unsettle, and it does so perfectly. To add to this, Frazen upends a lot of conventional filmmaking rules. Let me give you an example. One of the most basic filmmaking conventions is the 180-degree rule, and one of its most common applications is in dialogue scenes. Let's say we have an actor here and here. The dotted line in the middle denotes their matched eye lines. The rule states that in order to maintain a consistent left-right relationship between these actors, the camera should be kept on either the top or bottom side of this dividing line. To give a demonstration, here's a scene from Michael Mann's Heat. You can see that the eye lines of De Niro and Pacino match. The camera never crosses that imaginary line, therefore consistency is maintained. Now, let's take a look at this same rule, but in the context of our car ride scene. Instead of at opposite ends, our actors are placed right here, smack dab in the middle. While yes, the actors are facing forward, they have to look to their side in order to have a conversation. So, we can keep the line right where it is. If we look at the scene in action, we can see that the 180-degree rule is maintained, right? Well, it is until it isn't. Kaufman also shoots scenes from behind their perspective, thereby breaking the convention. If the goal of this rule is to ensure that things feel natural, then ignoring it must mean you want the opposite. And this is by no means the only technique that Kaufman and Frazen use to achieve that effect. Certain scenes are cut too short or too long from what you might naturally expect, bouncing between extremes of fleeting and fixated. This, coupled with a claustrophobic aspect ratio and tightly framed shots, help make for a truly unnerving experience. There's more I'd like to discuss about the technicals, but before I do that, it's time we catch up on the plot.
Hello?
When Jake and Amy arrive at the farmhouse, his parents are nowhere to be found. So, they bide their time, wandering around outside and waiting in front of the fireplace. "What's down there?" Amy asks, referring to the basement door. "Just a washer, dryer, stuff like that," responds Jake, deflecting the question. But there's scratches on the door and tape covering the lock.
Ah, here they come.
Is the drive okay?
Yeah, fine.
So glad to meet you, Louisa. Oh, Jake has told us so much about you.
Whoa, he's told me so much about both of you, too.
Oh, and you came anyway?
It's here at this farmhouse where the film plunges even further into its surreal and existential elements. The parents seem exaggerated and idiosyncratic. The mother's too giddy, and the father never meets his son's gaze. As the night carries on, it gets even weirder. Characters appear and disappear from scene to scene, the parents age right before their eyes, and the details change constantly.
Hey, who is this?
Asks Lucy.
You can't tell.
No.
It's me.
No, it was me. Wasn't it me?
Sorry for the delay.
Oh,
Kitchen emergency, don't you know?
When Lucy finally enters the basement, she finds two important things. Can you see it? Do you notice it? A janitor's clothing in the washer, and her paintings on the wall. With these two revelations out of the way, perhaps it's finally time we connect the dots. To preface, before we dive into an explanation, I think it's important to state the value of subjectivity. This film, like with any piece of artistic media, is open to interpretation, both from the author's viewpoint and without. The perspective I'm about to share is by no means the only one. In fact, there are plenty of in-depth and interesting interpretations throughout the film community, and that's the value of encouraging discussion when it comes to art. But I digress. Let's get into it. We can start first with Ames, or rather, the young woman. Her details change constantly throughout the film, including the color of her clothes, her childhood, and her profession. I've even referred to her with different names throughout this video. What's down there? Amy asks. Jake can hear Lucy's thoughts. Here's one of our main characters, of sorts, Lucia. She's credited as the young woman because she doesn't exist. She's a figment of Jake's imagination, but not the Jake we're familiar with, rather himself as the janitor. Everything that happens in this film, aside from the present timeline, is taking place within his head. He's imagining both an idealized version of someone he never met and an idealized version of his younger self. This young woman, is she an amalgamation of people he once knew, or is it just a single person, imagined with a host of different life stories? Does it even matter? Regardless, the main point is still the same. This young woman, this whole scenario in fact, is a manifestation of regret and unfulfilled possibilities. An art career unpursued, a pin for diligence, not acumen, a relationship never realized.
We never even talked, is the truth. I'm not even sure I registered him. There was a lot of people. I was there with my girlfriend. We were celebrating our anniversary, stopped in for a drink, and then this guy kept looking at me, which is a nuisance. The occupational hazard of being a female. You can't even go for a drink, always being looked at. He was a creeper, you know? I remember thinking, I wish my boyfriend was here. Which is, that's sort of sad, that being a woman, the only way a guy leaves you alone is that if you're with another guy, like you've been claimed, like your property, even then. Anyway, I can't remember what he looks like. Why would I? Nothing happened. He was just one of thousands of such non-interactions in my life.
Even his opinions are taken from other sources. The Bone Dog poem, for example, lifted straight from a book, or his thoughts on a woman under the influence, told verbatim from a Pauline Kael review. Ironically, the film sums it up best with a quote from Oscar Wilde.
Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives a mimicry, their passions a quotation.
I appreciate this ambiguity surrounding Jake's intelligence. Is his failure systemic? Even Jake doesn't know, torn between blaming society, blaming his parents, and blaming himself. So deep is his guilt that it manifests itself in the real world. An imagined dance sequence, which illustrates, in a meta-sense, how he views himself within the story he's created. I asked you earlier to keep the title of this film in mind, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It refers not only to the young woman's feelings about their relationship, but also to Jake's thoughts about killing himself. He knows where this road ends, and that's why he's always so adamant to take a detour, to interrupt himself from those suicidal thoughts. And this is what I wanted to bring up about the editing. Yes, it accentuates the tone, but it, alongside the other technical elements of this film, serves a grander purpose. It's a reflection of Jake's own desire to distract himself from his thoughts. Even more so, it's a creative way to showcase the fleeting and transient nature of one's own mind and memories. Details might change, and events can be misremembered. It's that which the editing and by extension, the cinematography and direction do so well to encapsulate that all of this is taking place inside the mind of our main character, our only real character. The sad part is, even in Jake's own fantasy, he can't have what he wants. He can't allow himself even a glimpse of success when his reality is so grim. He can't even tell his own story from his own perspective, effectively placing the agency of this narrative inside the hands of the young woman, at least to a degree. She is, for all intents and purposes, the other half of his internal struggle. Their conversations are a showcase of that turmoil, with every opinion a dispute, from every discussion a disagreement. We revisit Jake at the end of his shift. Presumably, it was during his work that he imagined all of these events taking place. It explains the intercut footage and the incorporation of his real life into the dream sequence. He decides to enter his car, but he doesn't drive home. Earlier, he imagined that hypothermia wouldn't be the worst way to go.
How long does it take me to hypothermia? Maybe it's not a bad way to go if I have to go.
So, he takes his keys out of the ignition and waits. What follows is a paradoxical undressing and a series of hallucinations, both potential symptoms of hypothermia. First, he imagines a Tulsi Town commercial. Second, a maggot-filled pig, calling back to the barn scene from the beginning of this video. Third, a speech, torn from the film A Beautiful Mind. It's Jake accepting an award and accepting death. As a side note, according to Kaufman, all of the people here in this audience are characters or extras that we've seen earlier. It's another example of Jake absorbing elements from his real life into his psyche. And finally, fourth, a song taken from the musical Oklahoma, Jake's final reflection on loneliness and isolation. It's with applause that the film fades into its final shot, a scene with Jake's car completely covered in snow. I mentioned earlier that this ending is ambiguous, and it is, to an extent. You can believe that, in following the pig, Jake re-entered the school, safe and sound from the hypothermia, or alternatively, that he remained here in his car. It's a morbid thought, but given everything this film was building toward, I tend to believe the latter.
How can a picture of a field be sad without a sad person looking sad in the field?
That's an interesting problem. I struggle with that.
This is a lot for a film. By no means will it be everyone's cup of tea. It's dense, it's dismal, and it practically demands more than one viewing. But despite all of that, it's one of my favorites. There's just so much here to analyze and dig into. Some might call it pretentious, and they have every right, but Kaufman's earned my trust, both as a screenwriter and a director. And to me, this is one of the most interesting things he's created. But if you didn't like it, don't fret. It's all subjective, and your experience is as equally valuable as mine. All I can say is, I'm happy you joined me for the video. Thank you for the support, and thank you so much for watching.